Midnight on the Jabbok. A man stands alone on the far bank, having sent his family across the dark water. Jacob had been running for 20 years. Now there was nowhere left to run. The brother he had cheated out of his birthright was coming at dawn, with 400 armed men. It started with a bowl of lentil soup. Jacob fed his hungry brother Esau, then took his birthright as payment. Dressed in goat skins, to deceive his blind father Isaac, he stole the blessing meant for Esau. When Esau discovered the deception, his rage was murderous. Jacob fled that very night. Now, across the river, distant torches marked Esau's camp. He was no longer a hungry brother but a war chief.
I cannot face him. I have always run. But tonight I cannot run.
So Jacob sent his wives, children, servants, and flocks across the Jabbok. He stayed on the bank alone. The darkness was absolute. He waited for the dawn that would bring either his brother's vengeance or a miracle.
God of my fathers, if you still hear a deceiver, do not let Esau slaughter my children.
But the darkness was no longer empty. A faint light appeared across the water, growing, approaching. Jacob turned. The light coalesced into a human form, featureless yet terrible. Before he could cry out, the figure seized him from behind with impossible strength.
Let go of me. Who are you?
But Jacob grabbed back, his hands locked onto the luminous arms, refusing to be thrown down.
If this is death, I will not go quietly.
The being struggled against him and could not overpower him. The riverbank became an arena of darkness and light. Two figures locked in mortal combat. The night would break Jacob's body and his name, but he did not yet know that.
This is no man. Nothing human struggles like this.
Hour after hour, they grappled in the dirt. Jacob's muscles screamed, but he could not break free, and neither could the being. The ancient text says plainly, the being saw that he could not overpower Jacob, so the figure did something unexpected. It reached down and touched the socket of Jacob's hip. The bone slid out of its joint instantly. Agony exploded through Jacob's body.
Let go. If I let go, I am dead. My family is dead. Hold on.
Let me go, for it is daybreak.
Jacob's answer was to tighten his grip. He would not release. Not for anything. Above them, the stars were fading. The first hint of dawn touched the horizon.
I will not let go, no matter what.
Despite the dislocation, despite the screaming pain, Jacob tightened his hold and spoke through gritted teeth.
I will not let you go unless you bless me.
The demand was audacious. A crippled man demanding a blessing from a being of light. For a long moment, the being went still. The only sound was the river and their ragged breath.
What is your name?
It was not a question of information. It was a question of confession.
My name? He knows it. Everyone knows what I am. Jacob.
He spoke the name he had always hated. Deceiver. Grasper. Grasper. A life of running and lying. The answer to his demand was coming. But it would not be what he expected. The being spoke, and the old name began to dissolve like mist before the sun.
Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome.
Israel. He struggles with God. That is my whole life.
The weight of those words struck deeper than any blow of the night. Dawn broke over the river. The figure's radiance grew almost blinding.
Tell me your name.
But the being did not answer. It only spoke a blessing over him, and then the light receded. Jacob collapsed onto the dirt, his hip dead beneath him, but his heart pounding with something greater.
I have seen God face to face, and yet my life was spared.
He called that place Peniel. The wrestling was over, but Jacob would never walk the same. Jacob pushed himself upright, clutching a makeshift staff. The hip joint howled in protest. He limped into the shallow water, each footfall a negotiation with agony. His family, waiting on the far bank, saw the crooked figure emerging, and their hearts froze. Then the horizon thickened. A plume of dust rose. 400 men were on the move.
Esau. He is coming. This is it. Every part of me wants to run, but my leg won't let me. Maybe that is the point. I'm not Jacob the deceiver anymore.
At the head of the column, a massive red-bearded figure rode slowly through the dust.
I will not bow before I see his face. I will meet my brother, Esau. I am not afraid. I am Israel.
Jacob arranged his family, placing the maidservants and their children first, then Leah and her young, then Rachel and Joseph last. He himself went on ahead of them, limping heavily, each step a shudder of pain. When he could see Esau's face through the dust, he fell to his knees and touched his forehead to the dirt. He bowed 7 full times, drawing out the last few measures between them.
Let him see. I am no longer the proud brother who stole a blessing. I am a broken man.
Esau stopped his men with a gesture and watched the pitiful approach. The only sound was the wind and the scrape of Jacob's robes on the ground.
This is it. The next words from his mouth will either be mercy or a death sentence.
The sun climbed higher, but the moment hung frozen. Esau remained motionless, his sword at his side, his eyes unreadable. Without a word, Esau broke into a run, his arms stretched wide. His sword lay forgotten in the dirt. Jacob flinched, but Esau grabbed his shoulders and pulled him to his feet.
Jacob, my brother.
Jacob clung to him, the sobs of 2 decades breaking loose at last. For a long moment, they only wept, the dusty ground drinking their tears under the morning sun.
Who are all these with you?
He wants to know my family. There is no anger in his voice. These are the children God has graciously given your servant.
One by one, Jacob's wives and children stepped forward, bowing low in fear and hope, and Esau lifted each one, his embrace saying what words could not. The war was over.
Let us journey together. I will go ahead with my men.
He offers protection, but I cannot keep up. My children and herds are too slow. My lord, the children are tender and the flocks nursing. If I push them too fast, they will die.
Then let me leave some of my men to escort you.
No, my lord. Let me come at my own pace to my home in Seir.
So Esau turned that day and went back to Seir. But Jacob limped on toward Succoth and later to Shechem, his staff marking each painful step.
The limp will always remind me I wrestled God and survived. It is not a curse. It is the mark of my blessing.
He entered Canaan, not as the grasping Jacob, but as Israel, the one who struggles with God and overcomes. The God of the universe allowed himself to be held by a man. Why? Because the wrestling was never about winning. It was about undoing a lifetime of self-reliance. The touch on his hip broke his physical strength, but it also shattered his old nature. The deceiver had to be unmade before the man of faith could emerge.
This limp is the mark of a God who refused to let me go.
God did not need to wrestle. He chose to, so Jacob would cling to him in desperation. The name Israel means he struggles with God. It is not a shame, it is the highest calling. At Peniel, Jacob left as a new creation. The limp was the proof of the encounter.
What looked like a defeat was the greatest victory of my life.
From one broken man, a nation would rise, called Israel, the ones who wrestle with God and overcome. From this midnight wrestling, a nation would take its name and its destiny. Israel, the ones who struggle with God and prevail through his grace. Not a people of ease, but a people marked by the grip of divine encounter. Every descendant of Abraham would walk with a hidden limp, a memory of holding on. The stars above the Jabbok were the same stars promised to Abraham, now sealed in struggle. Jacob held on through agony, and so his children would hold on through exile, through fire. God allowed himself to be held, not because he was weak, but because Jacob needed to be strong in a new way. The shooting star over Jacob's head was a sign. The blessing was rooted in the wrestling, and the limp would be the mark of a people who do not flee God, but chase him into the dark. This is the genesis of Israel, not a nation of the perfect, but of the persistent. Jacob walked on, his staff thumping a new rhythm. The old Jacob would have schemed, this one prayed.
I am Israel now. Not a deceiver, not a runner. A man who holds on.
Every step was a lesson in dependence. The limp was his instructor.
I used to trust my wit. Now my wit is broken, and I lean on God.
He no longer feared the future. The wrestling taught him that God can be trusted in the dark.
The limp is not weakness. It is the place where God's strength enters.
The promised land stretched before him, but his eyes were on something higher.
Peniel changed everything. I saw God and lived. Now every step is worship.
He walked not as a beggar, but as a prince who had wrestled with the Almighty.
Esau's embrace was the proof. God fights for those who cling to him.
God did not need to wrestle Jacob. He chose to show that surrender is not weakness but the grip of faith. The divine light vanished, but the limp remained, a permanent inscription of a holy encounter.
This limp was a gift. It broke my pride so I could finally lean on the one who never fails.
The riverbank at Peniel remains empty, but the footprints of that struggle have never faded. What looked like a defeat was the greatest victory, the night God allowed himself to be held. This is the strangest physical event in the Bible, and it is God's portrait of grace. He touches our strongest place and breaks it, so that we might hold on to him with a desperate faith.
Hold on, my children. Hold on through the dark. The blessing comes to those who refuse to let go.
Jacob's story is every believer's story. We wrestle with God until we learn that clinging to him is the only victory. And Jacob went forward, limping and blessed, into the sunrise. But the road to Shechem was not safe. A band of armed men blocked the path, demanding tribute.
The old Jacob would have lied, bribed, or snuck away in the night. But I am not that man. We will not fight, and we will not deceive. We will offer them a gift from our flocks and trust the God of Peniel. Every part of me screams to protect my family with cunning. But the limp reminds me, God fights for us.
The armed men watched suspicious as Jacob's servants brought forward lambs and goats, not as tribute to a warlord, but as a peace offering to neighbors.
If they slaughter us, we die as Israel, trusting, not grasping. That is the blessing.
The leader stepped forward, looked into Jacob's eyes, and saw there not the old greed, but something broken and fierce. He accepted the offering and let the caravan pass. No blood was spilled, no deception needed.
The old Jacob would have won but remained a villain. Israel surrendered and won peace.
But the land ahead was still full of Canaanites. Every day would be a new test of faith, a new wrestling in the daylight. As Jacob's caravan approached the hills of Shechem, a Canaanite warlord named Hamor descended from the city gates with 50 armed riders.
Another test. My first instinct is to lie, to say we are only poor shepherds. But the God of Peniel sees all.
Hamor demanded an audience. His eyes were hard, calculating. Jacob stepped forward, staff in hand, and bowed. He offered no bribe, no clever words.
No more tricks. If I die as Israel. I am a stranger in this land, returning to my fathers. I seek only to live at peace with you.
Hamor studied the limping man. No weapons, no threats, only a broken gait and a quiet defiance. Instead of seizing the flocks, Hamor proposed an alliance. Trade your daughters for our sons and dwell among us.
This would bind us to their idols, their ways. A blessing wrapped in a curse. We remain separate, even if it costs us safety. The limp is a harder path, but the only one.
But the peace with Hamor turned to blood. Jacob's sons Levi and Simeon, bred in the old deceit, deceived the whole city.
They used my own old tricks, words of peace to cover a sword. The cunning did not die with my name change.
Now Canaanite blood was on his sons' hands, and the surrounding cities would come for vengeance.
Do I protect them? They are my sons. But if I cover this sin, I become Jacob the deceiver again. You have brought trouble on me, making me stink to the inhabitants of the land. My numbers are few, and if they gather against me and attack, I shall be destroyed.
He did not excuse them. He named the sin, even knowing his sons might despise him for it.
The limp is heavier now. It carries the weight of raising sons who still grasp when they should hold on to God.
The surrounding peoples heard of the slaughter. A coalition of kings began to gather, and Jacob's small clan was surrounded by enemies.
God, I have chosen honesty over safety, but will my family survive the harvest of these old seeds?
The limp did not spare him from consequences. It only taught him to walk through them differently. Within days, the Amorites and Perizzites heard of the bloodshed. A coalition of Canaanite kings began to sharpen their swords for Jacob's clan.
If I stay, we are slaughtered. If I run, I am the old Jacob. But the God of Peniel has not left me.
Then a voice came to Jacob, not in the thunder, but in the memory of Bethel. Go up to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you were fleeing.
Bethel, the house of God. He met me there with a ladder of angels when I had nothing. Now I return as Israel. Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you and purify yourselves. We are going to Bethel to build an altar to the God who answered me in my distress.
His family dug a pit and buried their idols, the teraphim Rachel had stolen, the amulets the servants carried. All went into the earth.
We leave behind the weak defenses of men. The limp is my shield now.
The caravan set out at dawn, moving south toward the high country. Every eye watched the hills for a flash of bronze. The coalition was gathering, but Jacob did not look back. The limp drove him forward, into a future only God could see.
The altar at Bethel will be built with the stones of this journey. Every step is an offering.
The caravan climbed into the hills of Bethel, the place where Jacob had first met God in a dream of angels, without a word. Jacob gathered stones and built an altar, his limp a silent testimony to the God who had held him. Then God appeared to him again, as he had at Peniel, and said, "Your name is Israel. The land I gave to Abraham, I give to you."
The same voice that renamed me at Peniel now seals the promise at Bethel. The limp brought me here.
The coalition pursuing them halted 30 miles away. A terror from God fell upon the cities, and no one dared follow. The threat that had loomed since Shechem dissolved into the dust. Jacob and his household were safe.
Not a sword raised, not a lie spoken. God fought for us, and we only had to hold on. This place is the house of God. Here I will dwell, and my children's children will remember the night their father was broken and blessed.
The altar at Bethel became the center of Israel's earliest worship, a monument to the night. A man held onto God and received more than he could ever grasp.
The limp is my altar. Every step I take is a sacrifice of praise.
The days at Bethel were days of peace. The terror of God held back every enemy, and the land rested. Jacob's sons grew, their flocks multiplied, and the promises spoken at Peniel began to take root in Canaan's soil.
My sons still carry the old deceit, but the God of Peniel will wrestle with them too, in time.
He taught them not by cunning, but by the story of his limp, of that night when a grip of desperation became the hold of faith. Whenever a child asked why he limped, Jacob would smile and say, "I asked God for a blessing, and he answered me in the dark." And so the memory of Peniel passed from father to son, a sacred inheritance for the nation yet to be born.
I entered Canaan as a deceiver fleeing his brother. I walk it now as Israel, the one who held on to God and won.
The limp was not a scar of defeat, but a signature of the Almighty, written on the body of his chosen. And from that broken hip would rise a people called by that very name, Israel, the ones who struggle with God and overcome.
Hold on, my sons. The God of Peniel rewards the grip of faith.
Jacob grew old in the land, his beard fully white, his back bent, but the limp never faded. On his deathbed, he gathered his 12 sons and spoke the blessings that would shape the tribes of Israel.
The God before whom my fathers walked, the angel who delivered me from all harm, may he bless these boys. I lean now not on my own strength, but on the one who broke my hip to make me whole.
When he finished blessing them, he drew his feet into the bed and was gathered to his people. But the limp continued. It walked on in the steps of every Israelite who ever clung to God in the darkness. The name Israel is not a monument to ease, but to struggle, to the night. A man held onto his Creator and would not let go. A shooting star had passed over Jacob's head at Peniel, a sign that the blessing was sealed in the wrestling.
I am Israel. I have wrestled with God and with men, and I have overcome.
And from that night at the Jabbok, the blessing flowed through the ages, a river of grace born in a dislocated hip. The night at Peniel remains the strangest physical event in all of Scripture, yet its meaning reverberates through every age. If you have ever felt God breaking your own strength, remember, it is not punishment. It is the grip of a father who will not let you go. Jacob's limp is the emblem of every soul who has wrestled through the dark and risen with a blessing they would not release. The God of Peniel still meets people in their midnight. He still touches the places they lean on most, and when you emerge limping, you will know. The wound is not a curse. It is the mark of the blessing. Jacob went forward, limping and blessed into the sunrise. He held on, and God held him. From that night, a nation was born. Israel, the ones who wrestle with God and overcome. The limp is their inheritance. So may we, when the darkness presses, refuse to let go until we receive the blessing that changes our name. The limp is not shame. It is the signature of the Almighty, written on the body of His chosen. And Jacob walked forward, limping, into the eternal sunrise. The night Jacob wrestled God was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a nation. Every generation of Israel would look back to that dark riverbank and see not defeat, but the genesis of their identity. The limp entered their bloodline. It became the holy gate of a people who hold on to God through every exile. The blessing pronounced at Peniel still echoes. Your name shall be Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. That blessing is yours if you dare to wrestle through your own midnight. Do not let go until the dawn breaks and a new name rises in your heart. The limp is not a scar of shame. It is the signature of the Almighty on the soul that will not release him. And Jacob walked on, his limp a prayer, his steps an altar. Into the endless dawn, he held on, and God held him. And the name Israel, struggler with God, became the promise to all who will not let go.